Well, if it's Thursday, you know we won't finish off the show without person of interest. And he's not only the party leader to ANC party, but he's also the former vice president, the seventh of the nation, the deputy prime minister between 2008 to 2012, as well as the former finance minister from 1993 to 1997. Of course, he has a wide range of his profile, but that's just an example. But behind him, he's also a father and, of course, a husband. I have Honorable Musalia Mudavadi with me here in studio. Thank you so much for your time, Honorable Mudavadi. I mean, that's quite a large profile, but what does a man like you do when he is not running the country or not in, now that you've been out of parliament? What do you do to relax especially?
Wow, that's an interesting one. One of the things I like doing is traveling, but at the same time I enjoy my sports. I play golf. Maybe once a week when time allows, and then I spend some time in the gym. But apart from that, I would be reading, and I also enjoy talking to people, listening to them.
Right.
And when we are outside the social, I also have to look at matters of economy and business, because that is what life is all about. We have to work.
How do you balance? How do you do it all? How do you become a businessman, an active politician, and still have time to play golf and talk to people?
Well, it's a question of managing your time, because if we space ourselves well, you can spare time for quite a number of activities.
Right.
Yeah. So it does not mean that this business of somebody saying I've been immersed into something to the extent that I don't have time for anything else. I usually say it's a question of managing your time.
I'm sure family comes first.
Of course.
Would
Definitely.
you like to see your children go into politics like their father?
It's their decision, but if they did choose to go there, I wouldn't mind. But in reality, I'm not the kind of parent who wants to push my son or my daughter into a particular field. They have their own passion. And if politics becomes one of them, then I would encourage them. But at this point in time, they're still young, and I would like them to exhaust their imagination in this kind of situation before they can say they want to plunge into politics. But that's their decision.
That will be their decision. What role has your family played in establishing and being part of the making of Honorable Musalia Mudavadi?
Well, it would take a lot of time to explain this, but in terms of my father's background,
right.
He was a politician, but prior to entering politics, he served in the military. He was also a teacher, and subsequently he became the politician that he was in this country. He did inspire me as a parent, and at the same time, I really followed his career path quite carefully, and therefore I had some measure of background when it comes to moving into politics. I had the benefit of having had a parent who was a politician.
Right.
Yeah.
If Mudavadi was to sit down with someone today, dead or alive, and have a meal, who would it be with?
Man, it depends on where you are. But I think I would like to have my meal with a young man or a young woman who has the passion for this country and who would like to see a better country and who would like to feel that they can draw something from a conversation with me in the context of a greater vision for this country.
You know, normally when I ask that question to people, they say Nelson Mandela, Barack Obama, and so forth. I'm shocked you'd like to sit down with a young visionary person.
Yes, I think there's a difference here. I think we need to understand our young people ourselves. We need to encourage them. We need to get them to feel that what they aspire to perhaps is closer to home than being in these distant places. Because the reality of the matter is that they have to chart their course, they have to develop themselves, and I would be the happiest Kenyan if I can see the dignity of the young person in Kenya being brought to the fore, if I can see the young people beginning to believe in themselves, and if I can see the young people moving away from a notion that everybody who has attained something did not have to toil.
Right. And do you think that this nation has let down young people?
Yes, to some extent, yes. To some extent, yes, because we have created an impression that to achieve anything, you must take shortcuts. We have given the young people in this country that the only achiever is an achiever who is in politics. These are very wrong signals that we have been sending to our young people. And I would like them to be proud of their individual professions as they move along, and to make it count whether that young man wishes to be a teacher or wishes to be a doctor or wishes to be a farmer. What we have been trying to do, whether inadvertently or by design, is to try and make young people imagine that you must be in the rough and tumble of politics only.
If you look at
so we need to help them. And I would be very happy
if you'd help them with that. Yeah. And that leads me to my next question. If you look at Kenya, and if you truly look at the African continent, it's very young. Kenya's current parliament is the youngest that we've seen. Take a look at what's happening also in Uganda with the Bobby Wine situation. Do you think it's time that the older generation, not only in Kenya, but on the African continent, stepped down and let young people take now the lead?
For a nation, there's always a transition process.
Right.
All right. And politics, just as much as other professions, has an attrition process that takes its toll in terms of not necessarily depth, but in terms of the maturity and then the retirement of politicians.
Right.
All right. This must be a relationship that is very mutually beneficial. We must allow the young people to come in and take their space. We must also allow the young people to draw from the experience of those who may have been there earlier than them. And the reality of the day is that people will, it's like a conveyor belt. People will come, and then they'll be at the beginning of the conveyor belt, and after some years they'll come to the end of the conveyor belt.
Right.
So this is something that should be there. We cannot expect a revolution.
Right.
Okay? We must have a nation that draws from its mix.
Right.
The young and the senior citizens working together.
Okay, I'm gonna engage Honorable Mudavadi definitely on the issue of fuel, but first, the last time you probably saw him on TV before now, well, the Amani National Congress leader Musalia Mudavadi had earlier has rather voiced his support for President Uhuru's fight against corruption. And speaking in Nakuru, Mudavadi asked the president to tighten to news against corrupt elements that has dented the country's image. He urged the president to appoint a commission of inquiry into the sugar saga.
Uhuru, katiba inampatia mamlaka ya kipekee. Anaweza unda tume ya Judicial Commission of Inquiry, hata kitaka kuleta chairman ama judge kutoka nje vile Krigla alikuwa chairman, ama kitaka kuchukua judge kutoka Supreme Court akalie hiyo kiti, wachunguze hii mambo ya sukari, tujue ni nani amehatarisha maisha ya Wakenya. Amesema ana legacy, lakini tunamwambia hiyo legacy haiwezi kafika pahali inataka kufika paka ugonge hii nyoka inaitwa ufisadi. Na mimi nataka niwaambie, mimi naunga mkono kidhati kabisa hiyo barabara Uhuru amechukua, azidi kutwanga, amalize ufisadi, na tunamwambia ashike rungu agonge kichwa, asipige mkia, kwa sababu hiyo nyoka itageuka na imuume.
All right, Honorable Mudavadi.
Yes.
Go ahead. Do you think that President Uhuru Kenyatta is doing the best to fight corruption and tame it?
At the moment, the impetus that we are seeing is positive. And the fight against corruption must be multi-pronged. We have the institutions that are investigative. We have institutions that deal with prosecution, and we have the judiciary. So all these, and then we have the citizens, and we have parliament. So in this context, when I was encouraging Uhuru to maintain the momentum or even increase it, I was also conscious of the fact that there are a few things that we need to deal with. One is the capacity of all these institutions to deal with corruption.
Right.
Because we're having cases at the county government level, we're having cases at the national level. And our institutions, whether it is the Ethics Commission, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, whether it is the DCI, whether it is the police directly, where these institutions are also getting overstretched because there are so many cases that require attention. And you may find a single officer is being charged with the responsibility of investigating maybe 5-6 cases at the same time. Now, this can become extremely difficult and challenging to that individual and subsequently to the bigger institution.
So what do we do in order to strengthen these agencies?
So one of the things that we will do is that we need to resource them appropriately. And here, where there is some contradiction, is that the parliament, which is the majority, which is a Jubilee, has a Jubilee majority, made one glaring mistake. Whether it was by design or whether it was unintentional, I do not know. But if you look at the budgetary allocation that is being assigned to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and then you look at the budgetary allocation that has gone to the DPP, then you look at the allocation that has gone to the DCI, then you ask yourself, when you compare that with the allocation that has gone to Parliament itself, then there is a serious mismatch. Because I think the DPP's department is being given something like 3.6 billion, ethics more or less the same, and Parliament itself allocated a very big chunk for itself.
However, one would argue, why should we increase their money if Kenyans are still yet to see results of their work, given the amount that they already have?
You need to resource these institutions. Let us make our institutions work. This is the most important thing I want to put across. But in the meantime, there are also other areas, because not everything is necessarily criminal. There are some issues that are purely weaknesses in terms of policy. And hence, the call in the sugar industry that we need a judicial commission of inquiry. I said this more than 3 months ago. People thought I was on the wrong path. Parliament has debated this sugar issue saga twice. Finally, nothing has come out of it. And the Speaker has said Parliament has no more time to discuss this sugar saga. A commission of inquiry would be within the remit of the President constitutionally. He would set it up. He would draw the terms of reference. He would give it a time frame, maybe 6 months, to deliver its message.
Precisely my next question.
Yes.
We see the sugar, what is happening to sugar farmers, maize farmers in the country. We're going to get to fuel in just a moment. But even the corruption cases that we're seeing, critics will say all this, the reason why it's happening, especially to this magnitude, is because Kenya no longer has an opposition party. There's no watchdog. What do you say to those critics?
Kenya has an opposition, all right? And I have been very candid and honest enough to Kenyans to say that what we are going through is a situation where the opposition was rattled.
As NASA.
Okay, as NASA. And we have seen the circumstances around the politics sending a very conflicting message to the NASA legislators and also to the NASA county assembly members in certain areas. So we need to re-engineer ourselves, retrace our steps as Kenyans, and to say that opposition is good for the country, Opposition is a necessity for this country. And we must find ways of making sure that the opposition works. The only difference, which I strongly believe in, is that Kenyans must also now shift from perceiving opposition as an expression of violence, as an expression of hooliganism, for them to believe that there is opposition. We must look at it in the context of alternative policies, alternative positions, criticism for corrective purposes. This is what we need to look at. And that is why I say that as ANC, we launched NASA. We were committed to an ideal that strengthens democratic processes. And I would like, and I've been urging our members of parliament, that there is no shame in being in opposition. Take it as a responsibility, also recognized in the Constitution, and work for Kenyans.
So if ANC was to walk out today out of the NASA marriage, would it still be firm, independent, and still be a strategic and influential voice?
We are, at this point in time, speaking as ANC, and we seem to be speaking more like the opposition than any other of our sister parties at this point in time. But as a founding member of NASA, the position you must take is that you do not bring a baby to light and then you become the person to suffocate your child. So that is a principle that we take as NASA. But I think going forward, I'd like to tell our MPs here, let us be firm, let us be serious. Kenyans voted for you to go and legislate and also to take care of their interests. This must become more manifest than we are seeing today.
And if Raila Odinga was to vie for 2022, would you support him?
I think this conversation, and I've said it before, I'd rather speak my space. I'm not here to speak for Raila Odinga. So if you don't mind, I'd be so happy if we can move on to the issues so that we shift from discussing personalities.
All right, speaking of issues, the legislators, we saw what has been happening with fuel. These are members of parliament. Back in 2013, they decided to come up with a new tax, especially on petroleum products. It was exempted for 3 years. We pushed it to another 2 years, and those 2 years ended on the 31st of August, 2018. As of 1st of September, Kenyans are having to dig deeper into their pockets. The cost of living has increased. What options does President Uhuru Kenyatta have to make sure that, yes, Kenyans still live within their means, but at the same time, he achieves his legacy, which is the Big Four agenda?
That's a very interesting question and very important. First of all, let me just put it this way, that fuel is not a luxury commodity. Fuel is a necessity. It is a cross-cutting commodity or fuel, a cross-cutting item required in all our lives. Every day, every minute, it is so important. So we should not treat fuel and the taxation policies around fuel as if you're taxing some luxurious commodity, maybe a motor vehicle of high caliber or some fancy clothes and so forth. This is people's lives. So on this one, I think the message that should get out to President Uhuru is that his government has made a mistake. His government has erred in the sense that they have not been living within their means as a government. And because of their largesse and because of the programs they have where they want to have massive budgets presented in trillions, yet they know very well that they don't have the ability to fund that budget is very unfortunate. So to ask Kenyans to live within their means, and yet you as a government, you're not living